Hello, this is Deborah Clay, author and podcaster, and this is Castaway Books. Each week, I invite a guest to tell me about the books which have influenced their life and inspired their writing. This week's guest is Carrie Walker. Hello, and it's great to welcome Carrie Walker to my island today.
Well, hello, thank you for having me, Deborah. It's lovely to be here.
And first of all, congratulations on the publication of Escape to the Tuscan Vineyard, which came out on last week, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was last Thursday. The paperback was out last Thursday, and the ebook just yesterday, and the audio book's out as well. So yeah, all three formats are out there now. So it's very exciting.
And that comes after your other book, which was Escape to the Swiss Chalet. Am I right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Escape to the Swiss Chalet was out in November last year. So this has been a fast follow, if you like, because the two books are connected, but not. You can read them standalone. But Escape to the Swiss Chalet, some of the characters from that book are in the Tuscan Vineyard. So there's a couple of spoilers if you read them the other way around. If you're going to read both, it's best to start with the Swiss Chalet and then go to Tuscany after that.
Excellent. And as we get into your interview, we will hear about what influenced you to write those.
Thank you. Yes, perfect.
So let's get straight into book number one.
Yes, my first book. So the first book I've got is called The Wishing Chair, and it's by Enid Blyton. And I think this is probably the first book that I ever really remember reading that had a story that linked together, where my little brain was like, oh, okay, this is something I want to keep reading and keep doing. So I think obviously I'd done a lot of reading for school and learning words and putting words together, and Roger Red Hat and Jennifer Yellow Hat and all those sorts of things at primary school. But The Wishing Chair was a book that I think my mum gave me during the summer holidays. I think it was a book she'd read as a child. And I just remember being captivated. I started on the first page, and I actually picked it up again a few weeks ago. And literally within the first 3 pages, I think the brother and sister have walked into kind of an old antique shop. They're lost. They feel a bit frightened. They sit in a chair. They wish they were at home, and this dusty old chair sprouts wings and starts flying out the open door. So it's a brilliant masterclass, really, in sort of gripping your audience quickly, getting action happening quite quickly. And I just thought, wow, I can see as a child why this would have been so exciting to read and interesting for the imagination.
I think Enid Blyton comes up a lot as people's choice, and I can understand why. And I remember once in one of my book clubs, one of the ladies there said, when I'm looking for a book to read, I always look for a book that as an adult will excite me as much as Enid Blyton did when I was a child. And so you're right, there's great masterclass in storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Magical and whimsical, and all the things you as a child, you sort of think, oh, I wonder if I ever walk into a shop and that magic moment will happen. I suppose in a way that Harry Potter vibe, that thing where magic's around you, or it could be around you if you were to stumble upon it in the right kind of way. And that just opened the door to Enid Blyton's back catalogue, which, as we all know, is vast. So I went on to read the Magic Faraway Tree books, of which there's only 4 books in that collection. To say that I feel like I could still draw those characters even now and remember their names and the stories, that those stories really have affected me. They're definitely still in my heart and brain. Say I would have read them over 35 years ago. The Magic Faraway Tree books, and then the Famous 5 books, and the Secret 7 books, and Mallory Towers, and I couldn't get enough once I'd started down that slippery slope.
And were books very available to you? Did you go to libraries, or did you have new books?
No, so the Wishing Chair was my mum's book, and then I think maybe the Faraway Tree books I was bought for birthdays and Christmas, but we were always a member of the library. So I'm from the Midlands originally, from a town called Redditch, and they've got a huge library. And I just remember there's a ramp. Me and my sister used to run up the ramp, and we'd go once a week with my mum. And just the idea that you could order a book when I was a bit older, when I was probably in my early teens, you could order a book and then the next week it would be there, was just really exciting to us. So yeah, we'd get books out of the library. One of my mum's best friend's daughter, who was a really good friend of mine when I was growing up, she had a lot of the Sweet Valley High books, so I used to borrow books from her as well. So yeah, I would say we were more borrowers than buyers, but we did have a few of the books as well. Yeah,
I remember I went to stay with a girl. She used to visit the next door neighbour, who was her grandmother, and she lived in Ashby-Aladouche. And I remember staying with her, and her parents, she was very, very wealthy, her family, but she had pristine set of all the famous five, all the secret seven, every on the bookshelf. Whereas for me, I waited for my grandma to get them from work, where they used to have. She worked in the kitchens in a hospital, and she would get secondhand books from there from work and bring them to me. And I was really envious.
Yeah, that's the thing. You just take what you can get when you sort of come upon it, kind of thing. Yeah,
it's more precious.
Yeah.
Excellent. So let's go on to your second book.
Yeah, so the second book, I think more into my teenage years at this stage. So I'd sort of read a lot of Enid Blyton, I'd read a lot of those sort of younger books. And then I really got into Agatha Christie. And similarly, I'm like sort of locust going through all these books. As soon as I'd read one of those, I then wanted to read all of them. So the idea that the sort of the crime setup and the whodunit, the page turning of that. I think my dad was quite a big fan of crime writing. So he's always loved Agatha Christie when I was reading them. So I think I was borrowing a lot of his books then. And these days I will still read like Harlan Coben. My dad would still read James Patterson up until a few years ago. So yeah, I really loved the different Agatha Christie's and the way she set the books up, and just the fact that they were so different. But well, I felt like they were very different anyway as a teenager. And the book specifically that I pulled out for this is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but I think that was the first book I ever read that had what turned out to be an unreliable narrator. And I just remember it being, I suppose, having read so many books that were very maybe formulaic, that you would have a happy ending and would be a certain way. I think that was the first book that shocked me and made me reread the pages and rethink what I'd read and go back and reread sections to think, how can this be the reveal? I suppose it was just a huge twist that I wasn't expecting. And yeah, I just remember it really sort of resonating, that it was something that I'd been tricked in a way by a writer. I couldn't believe it.
Have you ever been tempted to write crime yourself?
I haven't ever written anything crimey. No, but I love reading it. So it's not to say I wouldn't ever. I just haven't up to now. So I went on a course, the Faber course, a few years ago. I did the 6 months how finish your novel, and before that we did a kind of taster day with one of the teachers there, and the first exercise he did with the whole room was to write down all your favorite books. And mine, I'm a Gemini, mine were very sort of love, sort of romance, funny sort of comedy type things, and then murdery and crimey and that kind of dichotomy. And he was talking about writing what you love, so I've definitely gone down one path so far. But yeah, there's nothing to say I couldn't give it a go, although it looks I think I'd be a terrible giveaway. I don't think I'd be able to trick anybody for long enough.
And what were your teens like? Were you living in Birmingham, did you say then?
Yeah, living just outside of Birmingham. Yeah, I was in one of the sort of new towns, and very local. I'm from a big Catholic family, so teens were school, high school, church on a Sunday, lots of family gatherings, and yeah, I went to university in Leeds once I left school. But yeah, a lot. I think we lived a little bit outside of the town, so you had to get in a car to get anywhere. So I think reading for me was something that I could control myself, I could do myself to entertain myself if I couldn't get anywhere else. So yeah, I'd while away the summer holidays definitely with my nose in a book, to the point where the lights would be out, we were meant to be asleep, and then I'd hold the curtain open and the book and the curtain together until the daylight had gone, and then my eyes were probably just worn out.
So how many siblings?
I've got an older brother and a younger sister.
Oh, you're only one of three then.
One of three, but me and my sister shared a bedroom whilst for most of our years, until my brother's 8 years older, and once he'd gone to university, then we had our own rooms. So yeah, so me and my sister had to suffer me with the curtain trying to read while she was.
I shared a room with my sister. I was one of four. And the first time I ever had a room on my own was when I was a student at some point. And I just remember, oh, this is all my own room.
Yeah, I can do whatever I like. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's go on to book number 3.
So book number 3 is probably an old classic. I imagine lots of people use sort of quote it, but Bridget Jones. I remember Bridget Jones very, very, very well coming out by Helen Fielding, the brilliant Helen Fielding, back in the 90s. So I would have been in my early 20s at that point. And yeah, I think it was, I'd read Adrian Mole when I was a teenager as well. So I think there's something about the diary format that I love. But I think Bridget Jones, even if I pick it up now, it can start me laughing quite quickly within a few pages. And I think that skill to be able to, it just tickles me the whole way through. The nature of it, I love the way that Helen Fielding writes. I love the kind of predicaments. I love the funny little language, the way she uses language and sort of makes her own versions of words up. And I think Bridget Jones, I don't know how old she was when she was in her 20s, wasn't she, when the diaries were out there? So I think she was probably a bit older than I was, but you know, smoking and drinking and trying to get a boyfriend and trying to go to work and get dressed in the morning and stuff. It's just it sort of appealed to me a lot. And yeah, I just loved that book so much. And I remember being on a flight on holiday with some friends and having the whole of the sequel and just like snuggling down and just loving the fact I had a few hours, because I think we were going off for a few weeks in our summer holidays, and just I think lots of people were asleep. It was a night flight, and I just turned the light on and just read and read. I just remember thinking it was bliss to just be on a plane, no expectations, just this brilliant book that I already felt like I knew it was going to be brilliant, because I'd obviously read the first one. So, and it was.
I noticed from your book choices that a number of them, in fact, possibly, well, most of them are sequels, and you write, series, and you write series as well. And so I'm the opposite. I just don't like reading a series. It's funny, isn't it? But that's something that you've always enjoyed. Have you been drawn to books that are in series?
Yeah, I think maybe it's that once you love a character, it's hard to let them go, for me anyway. And I think I'm probably like that with TV series now as well. Obviously they've announced the new Gavin and Stacey, and then they're like, and then that's the last one. Everyone's desperate for more, aren't they? When they fall in love with characters. I tend to feel like that. When Happy Valley ended last year, I was just like that. You sort of have this. I have this bereft feeling of that's it now. We're never going to see those characters again. It's done. So there's something nice, especially as a child, I think, of picking a book up and knowing the characters and being able to get straight into a story. Yeah, I think maybe it's just a bit of a shortcut to going into a different world.
I loved Happy Valley, but then if they brought another one, I would think, oh, but will it be as good as the last? I always think I like to finish when you're having a good time.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
disappointed.
I don't think anyone could come back from that episode either, really, realistic. So I think that was probably the way to go.
Oh. So you went to university? What did you study at university?
I studied communications and English literature. And at the time, communications was a bit of a newfangled subject. So there were only a couple of universities offering communications. And it was a brilliant course. It was looking at communications from all different types of angles, like advertising. They looked at communications in art, in radio, in television. So all the different modules helped you sort of learn a little bit about a different part of the creative world and how communication came through in those different places. So it was an amazing course, amazing start.
And what were you planning to do when you left university? Did you have aspirations at that stage?
Yeah, I did a media A level, and as part of that A level, our teacher at the time at school took us to an advertising agency in Birmingham. So we were a little gaggle of 17-year-olds looking around this advertising agency, which I just thought was the coolest place in the whole world. There were people wearing jeans, Deborah, to work, which I had never thought would be possible. At the time, you were allowed to smoke in the office. So there was a lot of smoking going on. There was a lot of people eating lunch at the desk, which to me, again, seemed very glamorous at the time. Now it's not so much now. And just a lot of young, cool, trendy people walking around doing their thing. So I just thought, wow, this is amazing. And I was asking lots of questions, and probably the sort of annoying student that was like, how do I can I come and work here, basically. And after the visit, I followed up with the agency and asked if I could come in for work experience, asked if I could, just sort of wouldn't let it go. And in the end, they offered me a sponsorship through university. So before I went to university, I'd sort of signed this deal with them for 3 years. And they gave me some money each term, and then I worked in the agency in my holidays, which was amazing. I had a really lovely boss. I worked on all sorts of different types of creative projects, and I was sort of project manager, but I obviously would work with the copywriters and with the art directors and the clients. So yeah, it was a really interesting job to do. But I knew that when I left university, I'd be working there at least I think I had to work there for at least a year. And I stayed there for a couple of years before I then.
That must have helped you as an author as well. There's so much marketing as you need to do of yourself as an author. Have you drawn on those skills?
Yes, 100%, 100%. I think it's more marketing than writing, isn't it?
I think so.
Feels like it at the moment. So yeah, I think, and also just working with writers my whole career, really. I've always been reading copy and thinking, is there a better way or a quicker way or a sharper way that we could say this, and getting the clients on board, so selling as well. Yeah, and I suppose with campaigns in advertising, you're always trying to get to the point quickly, or get your point across. So that all helps with the writing. But yeah, definitely as my career's evolved, thinking about how to engage with an audience. I mean, I say that, but I'm not on TikTok, or there's certain things that I know I probably should be doing that I'm not doing. But
there's always more you can do. It's marketing about, isn't it?
Exactly.
On to book 4.
Yes, so book number 4 is a bit of a strange choice, but I thought, actually, I really want to talk about 50 Shades of Grey, because that was a book. I remember, I think I had a bit of a lapse of reading. Once I really got into my career, I was working really long hours. I was, I'd be going out with clients or out with friends after work. So I had less and less reading time, really. So I was much more sort of working and playing and that kind of thing. And I remember 50 Shades of Grey coming out, and all the kind of furore around it. And I didn't really know. It's the first book that really hit in a viral kind of way. I sort of remember seeing it in the shops and then hearing something about it, and then hearing something about it on the news, and then realizing it was a self-published author. So getting snippets of it just around my world, and then buying it and reading it and thinking, this is an amazing thing. This author has done an amazing thing. She's whipped up a storm without, I don't, am I right in saying she didn't have an agent, and it was totally self-published,
I
wasn't
don't
it, I think?
know. I don't know. I've heard so many different stories. I don't know what the truth is, but yeah.
That's true, actually. Maybe it's not true, but it was
Yeah, she's
and
this is what I've read, that she was self-published. I don't know, was that all her journey, but yeah.
yes, I thought the same. And obviously millions of copies sold overnight, and it felt a bit like maybe watching something like The Traitors feels like in this day and age, you know, where it felt like everybody was doing the same thing at the same time. Everywhere you looked on the tube, there were people reading it, people were talking about it and laughing about it and interested in it. And I just remember reminding myself that writing, you can touch so many people in so many ways, and it's also a business, and you can make money, and there's lots of ways you can do it. And it just felt like a really exciting story on lots of levels, I think, for the author and reading the book. I mean, the book's, it is what it is, you know. You see literary snobs sort of saying, oh, the writing's terrible and she uses too many of these words and that words, but millions of people were reading that book and enjoying it, and then it got turned into a film, and then, you know, there were memes, and you can't argue with success like that in that way, I think.
I haven't read it, so I can't have any opinion on it, because I suppose the fact it was really popular put me off reading it. I'm not because I'm a
Yeah.
snob. I'm the same with anything. If everyone wants something, read something, then I don't want it. If someone goes on about a film, then I don't want to watch it. I go the opposite. I go the opposite way, and I can see how you, with your marketing and advertising and interest in that, would think, well, my goodness, got to work out how this become a phenomenon, because it's amazing what she achieved. But
Yeah,
why
definitely.
do you think so many people loved it? Because you have read it. Why do you think it was so popular?
I think it was, all in all, obviously there's a lot of sex in there, which some people love to read, I'm sure, but it was kind of like a dark love story. I mean, it's very similar to something like Pretty Woman or The Phantom of the Opera, or, you know, there's a sort of slightly damaged billionaire. Of course, he's a billionaire, and young and handsome and all of those things. And a sort of innocent, there's like an innocent and a kind of good and bad, you could see them as, or Pride and Prejudice. It's all of those things. It's a love story at its heart, albeit kind of there's a lot of sex in there. The Red Room, there was a lot of exploration around S&M and kind of control mechanisms and things that maybe hadn't been brought to the fore in books in that way before so much, but are obviously everywhere now. So it's a different type of story these days. But I think to me, the whole series, it's that love story. It's the will they, won't they, how they're gonna, how is this gonna end? How is this? It's an obsession. It was kind of like he was obsessed with her and her with him.
Interesting. I've noticed there seems to be a trend now very much for romance to be hotter. I think books should have little chilies against them as to how hot they
I
are.
see.
I'll read an author.
Isometer.
Yeah, I'll read an author that I've read before who really hasn't been that hot, and suddenly there are these sex scenes in it which wouldn't have gone with that author before. Do you think there's a trend to bring more sex into romance novels now?
I think there's definitely, the same as you say, I've definitely seen a trend to flag how whether there's sex or no sex, whether it's open door, closed door, so that people who are voracious readers know what they're getting before they get it. So I think, especially somewhere like TikTok or in reviews, you see people talking about the spiceometer, you know, that there's one chili or no chilies, or so I think that I see that, and there's audiences for everything, isn't there? Some people just do not want to read that. Some people really do. So, and you know, there's Facebook groups for everything. So yeah.
How many chilies for your books?
I would say a quarter of a chili. There's not, yeah, it's quite closed door. I would say, yeah.
That's my personal preference.
Not much chili in mine, really. Yeah,
I'm really
more cozy.
I'm happy to read sex scenes when they're relevant to the book and they're written well, but I don't like it if one's been put in when it has no place there. And yeah, you've got to have a skill to write them. I read there was something on the craft of writing, which was about writing sex scenes, and I thought this was such good advice. it was, there's different sorts of sex. There's angry sex. There's best friend. There's marital sex. There's best friend sex. All these sorts of different sorts of sex, which reflects the mood that you have in the relationship. So if you're writing it well and it is open door, how does that reflect the feelings and the relationship? And I think to do that well takes skill.
Yeah, totally. So it sort of feels like a layered piece that you're reading, not just physical in that way. Yeah.
Not something you've got in one of those sex magazines of the where people used to write in their fantasies and things, didn't they? I remember reading when I was a teen. I remember reading from my brother's store of books, magazines.
And people are nosy, aren't they, in that way? People want to know what other people are thinking, and it broadens the horizons. I mean, that's ultimately reading does that for us all, doesn't it? Sort of like.
So, what was going on in your life at the time? We're not talking about sex. Unless you wanted to, but you know.
No, well, I do, closed door. When I was reading the 50 Shades of Grey, so I would have been probably in my early 30s. I'd come out of a fairly long relationship, and I was living on my own in London probably for the first time, actually. I was living on my own in London for the first time. Prior to that, I'd always had flatmates or roommates or lived with my boyfriend, and so I think it was a real kind of moment in my life where I could just do what I wanted to do. I could buy books if I wanted to, read them on the I could read them at home. I could go out and play and work, and I think I was putting a lot into my job at the time. I was working in a branding agency, and it was a very free time for me. I think I was very I felt like I had lots of energy. It's different now.
Happy memories.
Exactly, the good old days. And I think it was probably a transitional time, because I'd come out of a relationship. I think I was working, but I was about to leave that job. I got my little dog quite soon after that. So there were things going on at the time, I think, where I was feeling like anything's possible, and I think that's probably one of those.
Okay, so actually that brings us quite well into your fifth choice. You want to tell us about that and talk about your transition in your life?
Yeah, sure. It's the fifth choice is called Simple Abundance, and it's a book by Sarah Ban Breathnach. I think I pronounced that right. And it is, I think the byline says it's a kind of 365 days of comfort and joy, or something like that. It's basically a page for every day of the year, and each page has the date on it, and a sort of a story, a mantra, a meditation, a thought piece, that have either been gathered by other writers or that the author's written herself. So whenever you buy it, you can start on the day that you buy it, and it's almost like something that you can engage with every day. So it's almost like a year-round advent calendar for life change moments, I would say. And it was something that my mum had that book, and I think she bought it me for Christmas. I think she'd had it, and I think I'd always liked her book, and whenever I saw my mum, I'd always look at the day. I'd nosy in on whatever the day was and read that page, or read those 2 pages. And mum bought me one for myself, and it helped me to connect with different parts of me, or sometimes there'd be like a rallying cry, or you'd have a kind of cheerleader story or moment. Other times it would be about decluttering or clearing out your physical space or your mental space, or it'd be about exercise, or it's all sorts of different elements that actually over the course of a year, it's not an instruction manual, but it's a kind of inspiration book, I would say, that helped me at the time, because there were different days and different messages, and it felt like something nice to have alongside me at the time, because I was I was finding my way, I would say, as a 30-something kind of singleton, as Bridget Jones would say, in London, and working my way through things.
So how did your life transform?
Well, it's always transforming, to be honest. There's always something going on. But I wouldn't say it was because of this book, but that book's definitely played a part in the journey. I think I changed jobs from the job I'd been in my early 30s to another job, and that wasn't the right job for me, and I ended up leaving that job, being paid my notice period, and that was where I had suddenly the time, a bit of money, enough money to cover me for a couple of months, and the breathing space to start writing properly and thinking about being a writer. And that's when I applied to the Faber course, which I then met some amazing people on, and I think that gave me the kick to submit 10,000 words, get feedback, start the process of, actually, if you're going to write, you need to hear what people think about your writing. If you're going to write, you need to think of what your story is going to be. You know, we're on the course, and the first day everyone's like, so what's your book about? And I'm like, because I had different pieces that I'd written, but I hadn't actually pieced them together enough to think, right, actually, this is it. You need to do it. So, and that course, I did get my book finished probably over 10 months, not 6 months. And that led on to sending it in to publishers and agents, lots of rejections, loads of rejections. And then eventually I sent it to somebody who was like, oh, maybe we could, not this story, but a different story, work with you on something. And that led to the Escape series. So fantastic. It's all a kind of domino effect.
Yeah. And your husband, just tell us what have you got. Tell us about, we're running out of time, but I just want to know about your meeting with your husband, because you're a romantic. Yes. So let's have the romantic story of your life.
I met my husband as well, I should mention. Yes, he was something. Yeah, that's been a big thing as well. So I met my husband online, and we met in 2018, and yeah, it was a very romantic story, actually. So we met online. We'd ended up missing each other. We'd missed a connection with each other. So we were meant to be meeting, and then we didn't meet. And then we tried to message each other, and it all got a bit confused and muddled. It's a classic, actually, rom-com scenario. And then eventually, about 6 or 8 weeks later, we got back in touch, and then went on a date. And yeah, we've been together pretty much ever since. And we got married in 2021. And then we moved house in 2022, and I got my book deal in 22, and so yeah, it's all been going on. So we had COVID in the middle, and actually my husband Rob had just moved in with me just about 3 months before COVID was announced. So it was a good a close, what do they call that, close proximity, Deborah, rom-com.
It was a make or break, really, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Brilliant. And yeah. The last question, it's been an absolute joy talking to you, but you can't leave my island until you tell me your luxury item you'd like to take with you.
I know, my luxury item, and I'm not sure how luxury can it be. Are we allowed to take whatever? Presumably we're fed, are we, on the island, or do we need food?
No, you can hunt and fish.
Oh, that's good, fine, we can feed ourselves. I think it would have to be a hairbrush, to be honest. I'd need some sort of, otherwise I would look like the wild woman of Borneo at all times. So I think I would have to have something to
imagine you like a mermaid sitting on the rock brushing your hair.
Yes, with the shell.
Yes, that's right. Well, thank you, and again, congratulations on your novel coming out, and enjoy celebrating that huge achievement. And the links for your book, Escape to the Tuscan Valley, and your Escape to the Swiss Chalet, will be on my webpage, which is www.deborahclay.com. So thank you, Jo.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.